What's the most unsettling thing someone has said to you that you can't forget? The most unsettling thing someone said to me was, "You'll never be the same again." It was after a serious injury, and at the time, I didn't fully understand the weight of those words. It wasn't just about physical recovery, it was about how my identity, my routines, and even the way I viewed the world would shift. Even though I've grown from it, that sentence has stayed with me, reminding me that change, especially the kind we don't choose, is inevitable. Make the kid in the corner shut up, old lady at 3 a.m. as she points to the empty corner. There was no kid. She passed not long after. Honestly, this kind of thing happens a lot. You start seeing ghosts inputting the crash cart in front of your door. When me and my husband finally told my oldest, then 3, I was pregnant, he stopped and grabbed my stomach intently. He thought for a moment and then said, "And we don't stab the baby with knives?" Hit correct, child. Dude who ran the local pizza shop had a few drinks one night and mentioned that the reason they immigrated to the US was that his dad, an older dude who was always sitting in the corner of the restaurant reading, had strangled a dude to death in a bar fight, and they had to GTFO of their home country to avoid prosecution retribution. A friend of mine got wasted one night at a bar I used to own. Before he left, he gave me a hug and said, "You wanted to say goodbye to me for being a good friend." He then tells me that he was leaving town next day because he was working with a government agency and was going to kill somebody in the morning that was stopping the progress of the town we live in. I laughed and took it as a drunk joke. He left with a bunch of friends. Next morning, another friend called me to say that our friend jumped off a boat and died. Someone once told me, completely straight-faced, "I wonder how many people would miss you if you were gone. Maybe just your family. And even they would move on eventually." They said it in this cold, almost analytical way, like they were just observing a fact. It shook me to my core, not just because of what they said, but because they said it so casually, like my existence was just optional. It stuck with me in a way that I can't really shake, even now. I had a tall, muscular man in the locker room when I worked at Firestone point his finger in my face and say, "You don't fuck with me, Bailey, it'll be your worst nightmare." He ended up being murdered several months later. His body was found in a parking lot on University Ave in Des Moines. Was on FaceTime with my wife because I was on the road. I was sitting alone in my hotel room and she said, "Who's that behind you?" And then the screen went out, the lights went off, and then quickly came back on. I couldn't sleep after that, so just got back on the road and as far away from there as I could. I was driving home per usual and got this random, unwavering feeling that my house had been broken into. I kind of laughed and said, "Please don't let my house have actually been broken into," out loud as I turned the corner onto my street. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up to the house were the blinds on my bedroom window. They were yanked around and twisted up. Some guy that lives across the street turned out to have been stalking me and decided to climb through my bedroom window. He took nothing valuable, just some weird personal items. It was terrifying to walk in and see my things rummaged through. It was even scarier when I talked to the neighbor and they admitted that multiple people in the neighborhood had seen it happen, but they were all too scared of old dude to say anything. The weirdest part of it all, and I mean this guy took some creepy personal things, is that nagging feeling I had before I found the remnants of the break-in. I swear I knew before I knew, and that was such an eerie feeling. Little girls like you go missing out here all the time, excuse me, what? One time, someone looked at me completely serious and said, "You know, if you disappeared, I don't think anyone would notice for a while." It wasn't meant as a joke or even to be mean, but it hit me so hard. Just the casual way they said it, as if it was a fact, messed with me for days. It wasn't even about the words, it was the realization that someone saw me as that invisible. My mom opened a closet we hadn't in like 10 years. A Furby opened his eyes and say something about that was a good sleep. That shed killed both her parents and shot herself in the head, but lived the second group therapy session. Whispered in my ear from by a person silently standing behind me, the last time I ever saw them. "If I could cut off your head and keep it in a bag, I'd carry it around with me forever." She was the niece of a famous murderer in my country. I made sure after that event to never attend anything they were present at again, and also made sure to remove them from all social media. "You're the woman every man wants to fuck, not the one they want to marry." His explanation when I was distraught upon finding out he had been using me to cheat on his fiancée, who I didn't know existed. A grown man talking about how great of a feeling it was to stand over the person he allegedly shot and killed. We were in a group of maybe 15 other grown men. One of those men had a legal duty to record the things he said. He was sitting directly to my right and was removed from the building shortly after trying to sell other people heroin. Edit. I have to add, this wasn't a simple story. I could have gone to court with how much detail before and after, and it seemed he was comfortable explaining the alleged situation. I was the one who told the supervisor that we needed to change the conversation. When I was giving birth to our son, immediately after he was born I had a severe hemorrhage and lost 3.6 L, over half my blood volume. I was rushed to surgery and clinically died on the operating table, but was resuscitated. My baby and I were kept in hospital for a week after the birth. He was fine, but the doctors thought I possibly had a stroke as well as needing to recover from the birth. When we were finally allowed to go home, my fiancé, now very much ex, came and picked us up. Then on the drive home he said to me very matter-of-factly, "I don't love you anymore. You mean nothing to me." I accepted that Yao died, and honestly it would have been easier if Yao stayed dead. I look at him, our son, and he means everything to me. I look at you and you mean nothing. Someone I knew had just passed the bar exam to become a lawyer. He got home from the exam and checked his voicemails. There was only one. It started with the sound of distant howling wind, then the sound of screaming men and women started, followed by what sounded like the cracking of whips. Continued for about 30 seconds and ended. He kind of chucked and said that Satan had called to congratulate him on passing the bar. Thanksgiving Day 27, my 15-year-old son, in hospice care, wakes up. Says tease-eyed pinches, "My great-grandfather wanted me to know he was proud of me and that he, my son, wanted to go home." He died 2 hours later. My great-grandfather died in KZ Treblinka following the liquidation of Od's ghetto. Unsettling in a different sense than most, but unsettling nonetheless. I was at work one night in the hospital. Pretty unremarkable night. Woke up in the ER confused AF. My first words to a coworker I know works the ER, who was standing there. "What are you doing up here?" She lets out a howling cackle and says, "I'm not up there. You're down here. You had a seizure. Now you won't be able to drive for a whole year." And is literally bent over snorting laughing. I had no seizure history. In that moment it felt like my entire life was a snow globe that got shook up and smashed on the ground. I still think about it sometimes. A reminder that your words and your affect in general matter.